In today's video, we are going to look at motives for European exploration. So motives mean why somebody chooses to do something. For example, my motive for becoming a teacher was to help young people learn about history because I enjoy history. So motives means why somebody's doing something. Why are Europeans exploring? By the end of this video, you should be able to answer this question. Why did Europeans start exploring? Okay, so remember, you should be taking notes while you're watching this video. So, during the medieval period, Europe was mostly shut off from the rest of the world. Goods from Asia and Africa came to Europe, but contact between Europeans and non-Europeans was very limited until the end of the 15th century. And this is because the good, like for example, a piece of pottery might have come from China and then transferred to somebody in India and then transferred to somebody in the Middle East and then transferred to somebody in Venice, and then from Venice it might have gone to the UK. So they're like passing the things that they're trading on. So there's very little contact between Europeans and non-Europeans. However, Europeans were really interested in the outside world. They had this whole genre of fantasy books that were being written. And they had lots of stories about people who lived in faraway areas. For example, in one country, they thought that people would be great giants of 28 feet long or 30 foot long and would eat more gladly man's flesh than any other flesh. So these are like cannibal giants. And in the far, far north, they felt that there was a land inhabited by cruel and evil women that had precious stones in their eyes. And if they saw a man, they would kill him at once because he looked at them. So they were really interested in the outside world, and they're making up all these sorts of stories. Here's an example map from the medieval period. So can you look at that, and in your notes, pause the video in a moment, in your notes write some of the things that you think are quite interesting about this world map. What's different about this world map than, for example, the world map we have hanging in our history classroom right now? So pause the video and take a few notes. So I guess one of the questions is, what prevented European contact with Asia and Africa? Why wasn't there a lot of European and non-European interaction? Well, the Muslim world controlled Central Asia for until the 13th century. So if we look at this map, this is the Islamic world to 1500. So you can see the purple world. It's controlled by an Islamic group of people. And it's a lot that they control. And you can see over time, it gets bigger and bigger. So in the 13th century, they had all of that purple area plus the yellow area. So they controlled all of that. By the 13th century, the Mongols, and these are people who come from, the north of China, just north of China, reopened the doors. So you think Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan, they're reopening the doors to Asia. And some of the most famous European travelers of the 13th century were the Polos, like Marco Polo. And they were from Venice, and they traveled to the court of the great Kublai Khan in 1271. So we talked about this a little bit before, but here you can see their route. So outward route in red, from Venice, they're going all over the place. Look, they're going into China, they're going into Mongolia, Beijing. Oh, they're going down into Burma, and they came back up through China, and then they take a sea voyage on the way back. So the Marco Polo, his dad Niccolo, they were the very early traders, and people were really interested in Marco's experiences, which he wrote in a book called Travels. So by the 14th century, the road closes again because rulers from Turkey, called the Ottomans, start taking over land, and this closes the overland routes to Asia once more. So here's a map again. This is the Ottoman Empire. It shows the extent of it. So it goes over time. In the 14th century, they have the dark red, pink, and yellow areas. So it closes off routes to Asia from Europe. And what happens is that Europeans become really interested in finding a route to Asia by the sea because they want to bypass the overland route so they don't have to get their trading through the Ottoman Empire. They want to bypass, they want to go around the Ottoman Empire and make the money all for themselves. So this is why we get people starting to explore. So who was going on these voyages? Well, we have merchants, adventurers, and government officials. So we're going to look at 3 different pictures. Here's an example of a merchant. I want you to stop the video in a few seconds and take notes on how do you know he's a merchant. A merchant is somebody who trades, who buys and sells things. How can you tell that this man is a merchant? Write down a few ideas in your notebook. Next we have explorers and adventurers. This explorer is Christopher Columbus. And these people are the king and queen of Spain. They don't go on the voyages. The king and queen stay in Spain, but their officials, their representatives go on the voyages, and they're very interested in it. So 3 people go on the voyages: merchants, adventurers, and government officials. Why do they go exploring? Well, one of the first reasons is commerce, trade, economics. Explorers want to find precious metals like gold, silver, bronze, all those sorts of things. And they also want direct access to spices in an area called the Spice Islands. So if you look at the map, you see the Spice Islands are very close. They're in Indonesia, very close to where we are now. So they want to find a route from Europe all the way to the Spice Islands. And as a note, spices were very expensive at this time. For example, cinnamon you could only find in the Spice Islands, and nutmeg and things like that. They were only found there. So very small amount, and people really liked them, which made them very, very expensive. So if the Europeans could get the spices, they could make tons of money because they would sell it, and they wouldn't have to go through any middlemen. Another reason for exploration is religion. Some explorers want to convert people to Christianity. Now, this is maybe a secondary reason. So the primary reason for exploring is commerce. The secondary reason for exploring is religion. So here you see an image. This is in Mexico. You see priests converting people to Christianity. You can see that they're priests because they're wearing white, very simple clothing. They have bald heads. Here's a nun. She's wearing a nun's habit, and they're holding crucifixes, crosses. And they're converting the native Mexican people to Christianity. Here they are baptizing them. Here's a baptismal font. They're becoming Christians. So now I want you to think. We've looked at 2 of the different reasons for exploration. I want you to pause the video in a moment and see if you can look at this quote and uncover its meaning. What does it mean when a person says, "I want to serve God and His majesty, to give light to those who are in darkness, and to grow rich as all men desire to do"? So translate this into modern day English. What is this person saying he wants to do? And finally, before setting off to explore, what else did countries need? They needed a few more things. What did countries need to be to explore? Countries needed to be quite strong. They needed to have enough money, and they needed to have a strong army to be able to explore. They also needed to be stable. So there had to be no wars going on inside their own country. The country needed to be able to not worry about what was happening inside of itself. And what kind of technology did explorers need? And we're going to be looking at this more closely next class, but they needed better maps than they had. They needed to develop the compass to tell them which direction north was in. They needed new ships that were faster and more easy to control. And they needed knowledge of the wind patterns to blow them around the world. So in summary, the motives for European exploration were God. They wanted to transmit their religion. Gold, they wanted to make a lot of money. And glory, they just wanted to be known as an important person. God, gold, and glory. These are the motives for European exploration. So be sure you've taken notes. You might need to watch this video one more time and in preparation for the quiz at the beginning of next class. Good luck!